You are listening to The Four Corners, the official podcast of No Counters, No Combos. What is up, Square Nation? Welcome back to the Four Corners podcast. And this week we have our reigning, defending champion from the ARG Springfield event, Mr. Tony Creatura himself. How are you, man? How's everything going? And how are you doing this evening?
Not bad. How are you?
I'm good, man. I really do appreciate you coming on tonight and just kind of chatting with us a little bit about Dragon Ball. But before we start talking Dragon Ball, I wanted to ask you a little bit about your personal life outside of Dragon Ball. Now, I haven't really followed you too much, so I do apologize for that. But I did remember coming across a conversational topic on Facebook about you being a power lifter. So, can you just kind of peel back the onion a little bit and walk me through that and how'd you get into all that?
Yeah, so basically a few years ago I got into lifting. My dad competed as a power lifter, still does. So I got into competing. And over the last few years I kind of took off in it. I recently set a world record for drug-tested squat. I hit a 660 squat at 165 body weight, so that's
Wow.
my main competitive outlet. And then after that comes Dragon Ball and Smash Bros and things like that.
Nice. So have you been, I mean, you're in phenomenal shape, obviously everybody can tell. So have you been doing this for a long time? Have you always been health conscious and working out in the gym and stuff like that?
So before stuff like this, I was just into baseball, basketball, stuff like that. I played since I was a little kid. I got into the first time I set foot in a gym the end of 2013. I started lifting. I just needed something new to do once I had been a year since I graduated high school, so I was just kind of getting bored.
All right. Well, I mean, it's definitely a very health conscious hobby to have. I'm sure you take care of yourself, your health, and your body. That's really important. And it's nice to see, outside of Dragon Ball, people actually have lives and stuff like that. We get so focused on the bubble that is the Dragon Ball Super card game that we sometimes we forget that people actually do things outside of that. So I really do appreciate you you kind of walking us through that, and it's really awesome about you breaking the world record. And I wish you more success in the future. And I'm sure you're going to be breaking records, from here on out. So that's really awesome. So you just recently won the Springfield event in Massachusetts. And if I'm not mistaken, it was a 90-player event.
Yeah, I know that they had a lot more people that pre-registered and didn't come out. I guess that a lot of it had to do with people not liking the format.
Mm-hmm. Now, do you think that's a problem directly related to the format itself?
I'm not entirely sure. This is the first tournament that I've played in since February.
Mm-hmm.
And within, I think by round 4, I was talking to Eric Goodwin. And I had said to him, I was like, man, this format just feels awful.
Yeah, I mean the whole shenanigans with the Super Shenron and all this other stuff. There's a lot of people up in arms in the community about it. Hopefully, better days are ahead. But I know, if I'm not mistaken, you piloted a Super Shenron variant at the tournament.
Yeah.
Now, did you do that because you felt like it was the best deck to play, or did you just really want to play Super Shenron?
So just kind of going back a little bit. Sorry, my phone was just being weird. So going back a little bit, when Super Shenron gotten announced, just reading it, I knew it was going to be broken.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've basically wanted to play whatever would be the good Super Shenron deck. So then obviously the Storm deck came up, and it just became more and more obvious the more when people had talked about the deck that it was by far the best. So it was I was basically, anytime I go to an event, I just want to play the best deck. I don't want to put myself in an immediate disadvantage. So that's basically, I don't like the deck.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's stupid, but I played it because it's just clearly the best.
Well, you're a competitor, naturally. You're traveling, you're going to these events. you're going there to win. I mean, yeah, it's nice to have fun and catch up with friends and stuff like that, but the competitive fire burns inside you. Being a competitive power lifter and setting world records, I completely understand. You can't be mad at somebody for playing the best deck because they want the best results. So obviously it's not your fault that the deck is broken, but there are a lot of thoughts in the community about the deck being too strong and it needs to be hit and this, that, and the third, and it has all these different variants and stuff like that.
So people are definitely very over the top with some of their complaints a lot of the time, because this is something that we've seen every single format. Whatever is the best deck is going to get a lot of complaints. I got into the game, it was Ginyu format, so my first event was 3 weeks into playing, and I actually played against Anthony Hernandez in the finals of ARG Atlantic City back in June.
Yeah, I remember I was there.
And after that, within a couple weeks, they announced Cronulla and stuff, and that the deck was just done. And it's obviously with Storm, it was a thing with SS3. Just people are always going to complain about what they don't like. And don't get me wrong, I hate this deck, and I think that the leader should be 100% banned. Mm-hmm. But it's people are under the impression that it takes no skill, takes no thought, that it's just all stuff like that, which is obviously not true. But still, I mean, I think that it's fine if there's overpowered cards in the game, because that's just the nature of card games. But stuff like taking an extra turn in 25-minute turns, that's where
correct,
it becomes an issue.
Correct. Now I know that people have come up with many different ideas on how to address the problems in the game and fix this and fix that. But I was having a conversation with a couple of my teammates yesterday, actually, and I was just yeah, Child's Wish is overpowered. Yeah, Path to Greatness is powerful and what it does. But if you just ban Super Shenron, the leader, you don't really have to touch anything else, because there's not going to be a leader that allows you to take a second turn. So I think there's many ways that it can be addressed. But I think if you really want to put the nail in the coffin, you hit the leader, because if you hit Child's Wish, it affects a lot of other decks. Obviously Agents of Destruction with the Dende is really good, and Child's Wish, it relies on that a lot too. But I feel like if you just hit Super Shenron, you can still play your Height of Mastery stuff with a different leader. You could probably just play it with Broly, and it's still going to be pretty successful. But it's that second turn that makes it busted.
Scott Dashy was playing the Chilai Lemo deck, and I played against him and one other person playing that deck, and it's just that uses Height of Mastery and it uses it effectively. But it's so you were saying, people complain about the leader, they complain about the Bulma, Dragon Radar, and Child's Wish. And I think the only card that deserves to get hit, at least right now, is the leader. Mm-hmm. I think hitting Child's Wish is kind of ridiculous, because I don't see a point in killing Shenron Veggies and things like that and other decks that want to use that card when it's only been a major problem in this deck.
Correct.
Bulma, again, this is the deck that makes it ridiculous. Before people were playing Super Shenron, even a month and a half ago or whatever it was, nobody was using Explorer Bulma. Dragon Raider, I don't understand at all hitting that card.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think it just comes back to obviously the leader. That's the card that needs to go.
Yeah, I mean that would be the easiest solution. Just ban the leader. It's one card off the block. No one's going to miss it too much, because outside of it taking a second turn, it does nothing. It's a basic generic Shenron leader. Has all the same effects as the other Shenrons. It's just the ultimate that makes it busted. So yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with you. I had a long conversation last week with Anthony Hernandez about the meta and the format and what needs to get banned and what doesn't need to get banned. And if you want to listen to that, you can go back and listen to it, for those of you who are listening to this podcast now. But after having a conversation this week about it, Super Shenron really is the problem, and that's the only card that really needs to go. So moving on, what was your record in Swiss after day one?
My record at the end of day one was 5-0-2.
Wow, 5-0-2. So what were your two draws?
I drew with it was the red Gogeta BR leader, I think. I don't know. It plays the Vekus and stuff, and it plays all the guys that bounce back to him.
Yeah.
That one we were in time. We couldn't finish game 3. Mm-hmm. And that one was weird because it was like I was attacking for what I thought was game, but he ended up having in game 3, and he had what's the red free negate
after image, yeah.
He had that, and I like on the previous attack he didn't have enough cards in drop to use the sparking, so it's like I was 5k off from just like outright winning, but instead we ended up matching on combo, and then the second attack didn't kill him, but it was the last turn in time.
Oh man, that's rough.
And then the other draw was to the Agent of Destruction Dende, and he actually ended up being my top 4 opponent.
I see. So do you feel like with the whole, because the one thing about Super Shenron you mentioned earlier is that the turns take a little bit of time. Like your turns are pretty long. On average, I compare it to football, time of possession. Super Shenron's going to have the highest time of possession rating out of any other deck in the game. Do you feel like that's
Not
why it
only
goes
that,
into time a lot?
Yeah, and plus like so obviously it's like most people, so this is going to sound really this is going to sound like arrogant and possibly mean. Most people that play the game aren't very good. So they I've seen people like misplay with the deck a lot and still do fine. Like obviously that won't get people through Top Cut, but it's like they don't know the right plays sometimes, so it's like maybe they'll take a little longer. I saw people like just not seeing very obvious plays with the deck, and it just kind of like, I don't know. I think that extended things too. I mean, granted, like mine and Anthony's finals match was almost 2 hours, so that's like that shows when you play a full 3 games with the deck. That shows like how long it goes. Like granted, like obviously you do have to sit, you have to think, but it's just like, and another issue with the time thing though. Shenron gets 3 out of 4 turn.
Yeah, that's rough.
And that's like the extra turn with the current time rules. It's just completely unreasonable. But so it's like with the time of possession thing that you referenced. It's like the fact that it gets to play most of the time during the actual like 60-minute round, and then we go into time and I get 3 turns out of 4. That's just not fair.
Yeah, I mean it's already an uphill battle, especially when you're going into time. Because the time rules are, they are what they are. You can like them, you can dislike them, but that's what we have implemented right now in the game. So you're already playing an uphill battle, but losing one of those turns is just kind of ridiculous. And, on top of that, I do agree with like what you said, the better players are going to make more crisp, more fluent, more economic plays. The deck 100% is not autopilot. I think that deck specifically relies so heavily on sequencing, and if you sequence improperly, you can essentially either lose or you're going to be playing from behind, because it is a skillful deck to pilot, and it does what it does well, and it does it very strongly, but it's 100% not autopilot in my opinion at all. So I definitely agree with you on that.
Yeah, I mean, if you draw like insane with the deck, and like there are some hands when where your plays are like strictly mapped out for you, and it's just like there's like very little room to make mistakes. But when you don't draw those absurd hands, like it's just like people complain about Yellow Blue Storm, but I think this Storm was a very, very skillful deck, even though I didn't like that deck either. But it's just like, yeah, I mean the deck is very Dragon Ball in general. I mean, it's a very skillful game. That's something I like about it, but still. So, regardless of skill, there's like a degree of the deck being just too insane.
Well, yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, you have to have the cards in order to play them. So yeah, fetching cards with a Wish Leader is good because you get 7 cantrips in your Dragon Balls anyway. So it's you're gonna see your cards. But what I really want to talk about, seeing that you had a lot of success with the deck, when it comes to your opening hand. And the mulligan phase, because the 2 hardest things for me, in my opinion, the 2 hardest things about Dragon Ball Super as a card game is what card are you going to charge, and what do you keep as your first 6 cards of the game. So obviously it's matchup dependent, but do you feel like there's certain cards that you have to keep to prevent the deck from bricking, or are you just trying to get as many Dragon Balls in your opening hand as possible?
Yeah, so like it's matchup dependent, but it also depends on like game 1 versus game 2 and 3. So I personally keep I like if I need and like a yellow card to charge, just because that means that you awaken turn 2, which is like obviously very strong because you get to use free energy and then free Child's Wish, get 2 energy back, and then go crazy off of that. Which obviously also requires getting to or keeping a Bulma. So other than like keeping, say, like Dragon Balls and like Bulma, maybe at 1 Child's Wish, something like that. As the tournament progressed, like it just became a necessity that you have to see Crisis Crusher.
Mm-hmm.
Like that became the most important card in the deck throughout the entire tournament because everybody was playing Borgos and Whis.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't out those cards, you pretty much can't do anything.
Right.
So basically, game 1, it became a situation of I would keep like 1 Dragon Ball and then just put back the rest for Crisis Crusher if I don't already have it.
Got you.
Games 2 and 3, literally everything except for 1 Dragon Ball goes back because I need to get to Crisis Crusher. So, like in the finals, going into game 3, I thought that I was going to lose because Anthony kept 4 cards and I put back all 6.
Mm.
So I figured that out of his 4 cards, I was like, all right, one of them's got to be Crisis Crusher, maybe a Dragon Ball, and then like Whis or something that's going to kill me.
Right.
But when I talked to him after, he kept, it was like a Radar, a Bulma, a Child's Wish, and I think a Dragon Ball. So it's like all cards that aren't going to stop me and aren't going to allow him to continue if I have the cards to stop him.
Right.
So I think that's where players were going wrong with the deck. And that's why I think that I did better in the mirror match than other people did, is because people were keeping the wrong cards games 2 and 3.
Interesting. Now, speaking about the mirror match specifically, obviously you're playing the Height of Mastery. You're playing Victory Strike as well, right?
I side deck Victory Strike.
Okay, so you're playing the Height of Mastery, and then you side into the Victory Strike. So when it comes to that mirror match, do you feel like it's obviously it's skillful to some degree, but does it rely heavily on the die roll?
I think that
you there? I lost you. Uh-oh. We seem to be having some technical difficulties. I cannot hear Tony at all. Let me see. Let me message him. I lost you there, bud. So we were in the process of asking Tony if he feels like the mirror match is more skill intensive or if it depends on the die roll and who gets to go first in that specific matchup. So that's when his communications cut out. So I'm trying to see if I can reestablish some communication with him right now because I'm not hearing him at all. He's not coming through. And if you can hear me, Tony, we can't hear you at all. So getting back to that, and then when Tony rejoins us, hopefully we can finish this conversation. So when it comes to the Super Shenron mirror match, and I haven't had much experience in the mirror myself because out of all of the Super Shenron variants I have played, the Height of Mastery / Victory Strike variant is the one that I haven't played at all. It just seems to... First of all, I don't own a copy of Victory Strike. But second of all, it just doesn't seem fun. Like, this just doesn't seem fun at all to me. So, when it comes to that type of mirror match, I can definitely see it. Like Tony said earlier, it depends on what you're keeping as far as your mulligan and your first 6 cards and, stuff like that, because you want to make sure that you have the answers for your potential matchup. But I can definitely see it being something where if you're an energy ahead or if you're a turn ahead, I can definitely see that being more advantageous to you as the player, as you being the turn play player as opposed to being on the draw. I think if you're on the draw, you have to be a little more aggressive so you can get your pieces off and kind of force your opponent to either defend or play with an uncomfortable life total. But I feel like in the exact opposite situation, if you're starting the game on the play and you're an energy ahead, you get to you get to your Super Shenron ultimate ability that much faster. So I think it all depends. And obviously we're talking about two very skilled players, specifically at the finals of Springfield with the matchup with Tony Creatura and Anthony Hernandez. Obviously, those are two of the better players in the game. So it does become a skill-intensive matchup specifically on how you play your turns. Now, hopefully we can get Tony back here very shortly, because I see his screen starting to blink up here on the Discord server. Still can't hear you, though. I do apologize, but sometimes, hey, technology craps out sometimes. So hopefully we can get him back shortly. For those of you listening, I just wanted to give a quick shout out to Computer and Gaming Universe and Level 1 Games. Now, obviously, Computer and Gaming Universe has been a sponsor here of No Counters, No Combos for quite some time, and we really do appreciate all their support. And without them, none of this would be possible here. And Level 1 Games has been one of my favorite local scenes here in northern New Jersey. You know, we definitely get consistent turnouts there on Tuesday nights, and we do a lot of our Battle Chamber videos there. So shout out to those guys. If you guys are listening, thank you so much for everything that you do here for No Counters, No Combos. And if you are listening right now and you're a player in the northern Jersey area, feel free to drop in either Monday nights for CGU or Tuesday nights for Level 1 games. We, as the northern New Jersey player base, are working on getting locals started up on different nights in other locations, but for right now, those are the two most consistent places that you can go to. Computer Gaming Universe, Monday night at 8, or Level 1 games, Tuesday night at 7:30. So, Tony, are you there?
Yeah, did I cut out or something?
You did. You totally cut out, and you left me by myself, and I had to completely just wing it, but we're good. You're back, so let's get right back into it. It's totally fine. Things happen, and it's not an issue.
Yeah, I was able to hear you still, but when I would talk, you weren't. I guess you couldn't hear me. I don't know what happened.
Yeah, you just completely. I mean, if you did it on purpose, it's fine. I have no problem with that at all. But yeah, so we were talking about the mirror, and if it depends on the die roll or just being a skillful matchup. And I already gave my 2 cents, but everybody listening to this podcast does not care about what I have to say. They want to hear it from you, the champ. So what do you think about that as far as the mirror match goes?
Well, what was the last thing that you were able to hear me say before?
Honestly, you cut out right as you started talking about what your thoughts were. So I didn't get anything.
Oh, damn.
Yeah.
All right. Well, basically, what I was saying is that I don't have as much experience in the mirror match outside of this event, and my issue with the matches that I did play the mirror during Springfield, I didn't play against anyone that was playing 7 regular Dragon Balls. Everybody was playing 6 and then 1 Super Dragon Ball.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that card puts you at a massive, massive disadvantage in the mirror. So, like, at that point, I don't think the die roll even matters. I think that if you're playing Super Dragon Ball, you're already, like, it's like a 30-70 matchup at that point in the player's favor that plays 7 regular. So if both players are playing 7 regular, I don't think it's... So it's... Die roll obviously helps. The die roll does put you far ahead if you're both playing 7 regular, or even if you're both playing 1 Super Dragon Ball. But it comes down to a lot of, like, who sees more Whis, who sees Crisis Crusher, who doesn't. And then, like, I even saw players make the mistake of... So they would go first, and they would play a Bardock. And by playing Bardock, you immediately now, like, you can't just Crisis Crusher for 1 energy. You have to, like, Child Switch it back or play it for 3. And, like, if your opponent starts stacking up Whis, then you just can't do anything.
Right.
So it's like, die roll's always going to help in your favor, but I don't think it's... Like, I saw people saying, like, oh, this person's going first, they win. And that's just not true.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely see it being one of those situations where you want to out-resource. You kind of want to strong-arm your opponent a little bit. But when you guys are playing... Because you guys are playing similar builds. I mean, obviously, nobody's deck is going to be a carbon copy because everybody has a different playstyle. But you did mention the Super Dragon Ball. Now, I understand what you say or I understand what you mean when you say that if you're playing Super Dragon Balls, you're playing from behind, because essentially that's your turn 2 play. You tapping 2 energy to play Super Dragon Ball, and then you're awakening and doing everything you have to do, but you've already tapped those 2 energies. So if you want to go ahead and continue with your untapped plays, you have to use the first wish as part of your leader skill. So that first free wish is going to come in, and and then you're going to start rolling on the train there. But do you really feel like that first one that you play really sets you back? Like, are you really trying to take your second turn on turn 2, or do you feel like
no? It's not that you're trying to take your second turn. It's that your entire turn is devoted to Super Dragon Ball. You have to use the 2 energy, and then it's like, if you're lucky, you'll get to all 7 Dragon Balls that turn, and you could, free wish. So if you get to all 7 Dragon Balls, get the Bulma to put it in your drop off of the Super Dragon Ball, and have Child's Wish. If you have all of that together on turn 2, then all right, you get to do that, awaken, free wish, untap 2, and then continue. But that's not going to happen every time. So sometimes you're just tapping yourself out with no more plays, and that's it. That's your whole turn, and that could put you behind by a lot. Or especially if you're going second, you just auto loop because now you're tapped out.
Right.
If you're playing regular Dragon Balls, you can afford to not awaken that turn. It doesn't matter. So if what you do on turn 1, ideally, if you're playing Super Dragon Ball, is you play like Crisis Crusher or something. If you don't play Crisis Crusher on turn 1, then you pretty much lose to Whis off rip.
Yeah.
Because if you don't play Crisis Crusher, then on turn 2, you have to use your 2 energy on the Super Dragon Ball, and then you have to wish back Bulma, and now you can't play Crisis Crusher, so now your opponent just starts to get to drop Whis freely, and there's nothing you can do about it at that point.
Right.
You become so far behind just off of that. Even if you awaken, like, you're still in a horrible position.
So it sounds like you're following a very specific line of play. Turn 1, you play Crisis Crusher. Turn 2, you do what you have to do. Turn 3, so on and so on and so on. Okay.
Yeah, like if you play Super Dragon Ball, you have to have that specific line of play for it to be like bearable. Where if you're playing 7 regular Dragon Balls, there's so much wiggle room. There's so much freedom for you to kind of like mess around with how you're going to do things. You could just like what's it called? You could just Dragon Radar turn 1, see what they do, and then play Crisis Crusher turn 2 to pop their Whis if they did that in response. Mm-hmm. You could play Bardox. You could play more radars. There's so much more freedom to it, and so much more like openness that you don't have to devote a bunch of energy to.
I see. That's pretty interesting. I mean, I like the Super Dragon Ball card. I think it's very cute. Drawing 4 cards just seems really strong. And then obviously, you get to pitch your 2 pieces, so you get to put your Bulmas in the drop area if you need to. It kind of subs the 1-star ball, because a lot of people were playing six regulars and then 1-star just so they can put their Child's Wish or their whatever they want in their drop turn 1.
I also thought that was incorrect to do. When I played Shenron Gogeta at Nats, and I just played 7 regular Dragon Balls just because I still think it's significantly better. Oh, and then to further like how specific Super Dragon Ball is, so even if you get Crisis Crusher and then you get the turn 2 awaken, you have the Child's Wish, all that, then in order to do the extra turn into Height of Mastery, turn 3 you have to use one of your 3 energy on Bardock, and then you do a few Child's Wishes, and then you have to use the remaining 2 energy on Path to Greatness. And it's just all way too specific. Leaves you no room to ever use Dragon Radar or anything like that extends plays and makes things more consistent. So It's like, it just still comes back to it's way more consistent with 7 regular.
Yeah. I mean, again, I'm not gonna dispute what you're saying, because you won an event and you've had success with it, and I choose not to really play Super Shenron on a local level because it doesn't make sense. So I definitely see what you're saying. When it comes to the different variants, so you have the Height of Mastery Victory Strike variant, you have the Storm variant, and then you have, I guess you can bubble it into the Storm with like the blue stuff like that. Have you had experience playing with the deck against the other variants, or do you just feel like the Height of Mastery Victory Strike variant is the one and only variant that should be being played right now?
So like I said before, tournament in February. So like I have very little experience with the deck. The only testing that I actually did was the night before the event, and me and my friend Joe, who I think he got like 15 in Swift. He and I tested the yellow blue versus my version of the Height of Mastery, and I think that the Height of Mastery version is just so far and away better. Like just not even close.
Yeah, I mean, Height of Mastery itself coming down, having deflect, tapping energy down, it's like there's really not much you can do. And then taking a second turn, you're talking about 4 attacks with triple. You're talking about 12 damage with just 1 card. And then if you want to be cute and put the Victory Strike over the top of it, well then there's really not much you can do. So I think the separation is few and far between right now at this point. There's been enough events to show what Height of Mastery can really do, and until something happens to it, I think that's going to be the Tier 0 deck for the foreseeable future.
Yeah,
now,
also, I don't know if you saw on the website, the official website, if you go to the errata page, it says that there's an update coming on May 19th.
Interesting.
So, whatever that's going to be, I am 99% sure that means that Super Shenron is dead. They're going to do something to either kill or significantly weaken the deck.
Do they have any events coming up after May 19th? Are there any events coming up that you're going to that's after that date?
So I know that India is coming up in like the second weekend, like the 8th and 9th of June. I'm not going to that, but I am going to be at the Invitational in Atlantic City on June 28th and 29th.
So there's nothing happening in the month of May. So this definitely, if they're going to do anything before Set 7 comes out, May is probably the month for them to do it.
Yeah. When does Set 7 come, do you know?
August. It comes out in August.
Oh, okay.
So
yeah, we have plenty of time then.
Yeah. So if they do decide to make an adjustment to the game right now, with the lull in tournaments and major events being the month of May, it makes sense for them to do it now because it gives us, the player base, enough time to test before Indy and before AC and everything else that comes after that. So hopefully, fingers crossed, like we talked about earlier, they just need to get rid of the leader. It's not rocket science, just get rid of the leader. Agents of Destruction with the Dende is a very, very strong deck, but it does have answers to it, so it's not like something crazy, and they don't take a second turn, which is the real problem here anyway. So moving right along.
It's like,
go ahead. What were you gonna say?
No, go ahead.
So moving right along, I wanted to ask you about your finals matchup with Anthony specifically. So if I'm not mistaken, you lost game 1 and then you won games 2 and 3.
Yeah.
Okay. So in game 1, your loss. Do you feel like you lost because of some misplays that you might have done, or did Anthony just have the outs for that game?
So funny thing with game 1 is that turn 1 I charged something and then I used leader skill to get 2 Dragon Balls, and I made sure to hold the cards out so that the stream could see it. I had 4 Dragon Balls in life game 1.
Oof.
And on top of that, I just had a really bad hand, so it was like there was nothing I could.
Yeah, sometimes it just happens. Sometimes, the variance of playing a Wish deck or a Dragon Ball leader deck, you always run into the possibility of there being Dragon Balls, an uncomfortable amount of Dragon Balls in your life, and that's something that you just have to deal with. But luckily, that wasn't the end all be all of the match for you, and you were able to take games 2 and 3.
So it's like on top of having 4 Dragon Balls in life, like I think when he attacked me once or twice, and like when I took the damage, I didn't pick up Dragon Balls, I picked up other things, so rough. I had to go down to like 2 life immediately. So he just because I couldn't get anything started because I was just drawing so bad and like super unlucky with that, I had to focus on playing defense at that point. So then he took his extra turn and just kind of beat me down with like Paths of Greatness, Bardock, and Dependables and stuff.
Yeah. So you got into top. What it was? The top cut was what? Top 8, right?
Yeah, top 8.
So you got into top 8 with a 502 record. What was your final standing after Swiss? Hello? Uh-oh. Did it happen again? Oh, no. Did it happen again?
Hello?
Dude, you scared me there for a second. I thought I lost you again.
Oh, I don't know what happened, but did you hear what I said back to you?
No. No. So being 502, what was your final standing after Swiss?
Third place.
Third place. Okay. All right. So that's good. And then obviously the top cut, formulated and everything like that. So obviously the elephant in the room is that 5 of the top 8 slots were Super Shenron variants, right? So
yeah.
Being a player of this game, do you have a problem with that?
No. I don't. Like when I at Atlantic City back in like June, the first event I played in, I think it was like 11 out of top 16 was Ginyu. And like, I don't think that it's a bad thing when the best deck is highly represented. Like, it's the best deck, that should just happen. I just have a problem with like the deck itself. I don't have any issue with like one deck dominating. Like years ago, I used to play you. Like, I don't, if anyone remembers, like back in 2009, like Teledad would take literally 16 out of 16 spots in Top Cut for Yu-Gi-Oh events. It was, and plus some of the decks would be completely identical, main, side, deck, everything. So it's like seeing and being like 5 out of 8 to me is not.
Yeah. I mean, I did come from Yu-Gi-Oh! It was nothing. I played after the Teledad format, so I don't have that experience that you did with the 16 out of 16 slots being the same deck. But you can't really blame people for playing the most powerful deck because in the spirit of competition, we're all trying to go out to these events to do well. So if you have the access or the means to play the best deck or the strongest deck in the format, the more power to you because you're going to have representation in Top Cut or on day 2 rather. But aside from that, moving forward for you, Mr. Tony Creatura, is it something if Super Shenron doesn't get hit, if they're just like whatever, we printed this card in our most recent set and we're just going to kind of let it ride the wave and let people play it and yada yada yada. For you, competitively going to bigger events, is that something you're going to continue to play, or are you going to experiment with different leaders and archetypes and try to have, probably a little more fun in a tournament as opposed to being so competitive?
No question. I would be playing Super Shenron still.
Yeah.
It is. So it's like, if someone wants to have fun, like more power to you. Play what you want to play, but it's like there's decent money on the line in Top Cut, and plus, like looking at the Invitational. First place is $4,000, so there's no way someone can convince me to play something that's not Super Shenron for that event if it were to still be legal.
Yeah, I mean,
unless there's somehow a new best deck.
Yeah, I mean, $4,000 for first place is that's quite a bit of coin. So I definitely hope, just being a player in this game and concerned. I don't want to say concerned, but I want what's best for the game and the community, and at the end of the day, Super Shenron is probably not what's best for the game and for the community. So if Bandai decides to hit it, I hope it's sooner rather than later, so it gives people enough time to go back to the drawing board and find that next best deck. Now, if they do decide to get rid of Super Shenron, I think where we're at right now in the game, aside from different formats, when it was Mecha Frieza format, there was 2 clear-cut best decks, and that was it. And then they hit Mecha, and then SS3 became the best deck, and then they hit SS3, and then Hirudegarn became the best deck. So there's always been that clear-cut, next deck to step up and take the top spot. But right now, where we're at in our game, it's pretty interesting because if you eliminate Super Shenron, there's like 3 or 4 decks that can now become the best deck in the format. Because aside from Super Shenron having success, a lot of Green Broly decks have had success, a lot of skillless decks have had success, and there's always like the Janemba, the constant Janemba deck that is always...
Janemba would get stronger with Super Shenron gone.
Exactly. So it now, instead of Super Shenron going away and there only being one clear-cut deck that's the best in the format, it now opens it up for a little more variety. Do you go the Broly route? Do you go the skillless route? And I think if you build a triangle meta format around those three decks, Broly loses to Janemba unless it has a secret rare. Janemba can kind of lose to skillless because they can keep recurring their vanillas from the drop area. And then skillless and Broly is kind of more 50-50. So it does become a lot more skill-intensive moving forward. But I think that's a healthier scenario for the game. It's just going to be interesting to see what Bandai decides to do moving forward. So your thoughts on that? The next best deck outside Super Shenron.
So first off, I think that when they ban Super Shenron, honestly, I would like them to see ban Bardock the Progenitor also.
Okay.
Because, it seems like every format is becoming what deck can Bardock be played in, and that becomes the top deck. So it's I would like to see that card gone because Set 4 lived its time, and we're approaching Set 7. There's no reason Bardock should continue to dominate the game. So in terms of what the next best deck would be if this was gone, it's really tough because I don't have really much experience with the other decks. I think that Green Broly is great, but I can't play a deck that has an auto-lose matchup like Janemba.
Mm-hmm.
So it's sure, if you have the secret rare, you could win, but in all of the cases, it's pretty auto-lose from what I hear, and if you play against 2 or 3 Janembas in a tournament, that's really, really bad.
Right.
So there's that, probably some kind of skillless Goku deck, but the problem is that deck is very fair.
Yep.
And the best deck usually is not that balanced fair.
Right.
So I might go with AOD Dende.
Okay.
Because I think it has such an absurdly high ceiling.
Okay.
But it's a tough call.
Yeah, and that's what I think. That's what I think should be the situation. I think it should be, the top players in this game, and the Anthony Hernandezes of the world should be able to be okay, well, if Super Shenron gets hit, what's the next best deck? And the fact that you guys, if that happens, and we have options now, you can throw up skillless Broly, Agents of Dende, and you can throw up Janemba, because Janemba, even though it's kind of anti-meta, it's anti-meta enough to the point where it's meta, because Janemba always has some type of representation. I think Devin Butterworth went undefeated in Swiss with that deck, and he was able to top with it, and then he was one of probably the only players that was playing the deck.
He had one loss.
Okay. But still, it's okay, Janemba is that constant, thorn in everybody's side, and I think with the new expansions coming out this week or next week, and it having access to yellow, I think it's going to get a little better having access to those yellow negates like Nimbus and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting to see what people decide to craft around it, but if you throw yellow in Janemba and you give it access to Nimbus and Crusher Ball, that's not going to be a fun time for your opponent.
Yeah, I know. So it's my issue with Janemba is that, at the very least, obviously we have TN now, but I don't like Janemba because I don't it's not interactive really, it's just a lot of them comboing out of your stuff.
Right.
But in terms of the possibility of a triangle format, I don't mind formats like that, but I prefer when there's a clear best deck, because the last time that we had somewhat of a triangle format was going into nationals, and I think that format was awful. I think that format was even worse than what we have now, because the 3 decks that me and my team were looking at going into that event were Storm, Shenron Gogeta, and Hercule, because we were just coming off of Hercule format,
right,
going into set 5,
right,
and those 3 decks form a triangle, but it's such a horrible triangle because it's all 90-10 matchups. So Storm absolutely destroys Shenron Gogeta absolutely annihilates Hercule, and Hercule pretty much can't lose to Storm. So something like that, I think, is really, really bad for the game, where it's like, you play a deck hoping that the one you beat is, if it's not, if you like people are playing the one that you lose to, skill could just get thrown out the window.
Right.
And it's just, you just played the wrong matchup. Doesn't matter if you're significantly better of a player, you just can't win. Now, if it's like 60-40 matchups across the board for the triangle, that kind of thing I think is fine. I think that's a good format. It may not be the kind of format that I like, but I think it's what's best for the game.
Yeah, I think the most balanced triangle meta that we've had was way back in set 2 when it was Cell, starter deck Goku, and Vegeta. I think that was the most, because even though it was a triangle meta, Vegeta, like the lesser favored matchups could still sneak out a couple wins if they knew what they were doing. And, everybody talks about it in the community. If you've been playing the game for that long, everybody agrees that Set 2 format was probably the most balanced and the most competitive / fun format that we've had. Obviously, only being 2 sets in, the card pool is not that large, but it was a lot more skill intensive. Games went past 5 and 6 energies, and it was like, it was healthy. And then they started speeding everything up. They introduced Mecha Frieza, and the rest is history. But I don't think that we're ever going to get to a format like that, because there's a huge power creep in Dragon Ball. Like, if you just look at cards, from set 1 and you look at their newer counterparts, the newer ones are just 100 times better. Like, if you look at, for example, in set 4, they introduced, and I just use this as an example, I'm not saying that this is the epitome of a power creep, but in set 4 they introduced us with two negates. One was instant transmission and one was sacrifice, and they were tied to their specific leaders, but they were the first free negates of their kind. So it was instant transmission. If you had a lineage leader, you could take a life and negate the attack. Same thing with sacrifice. If you had an Namekian leader, you take a life and negate the attack. But that's all they did. They were just free negates. Introduce set 5, and you're getting one for each color. That they have also secondary effects. Time magic, being a free negate and not being able to, your opponent not being able to restand. Shocking Death Ball, a free negate that kills a 2 or less. After Image, not necessarily a negate, but neg something 10 and gives you plus 40. And then Dimension Magic, the power creep, I use that as a perfect example. That power creep was ridiculous because it makes those cards obsolete. So I don't think we'll ever get back to a format where we had in set 2 of it being this well-balanced game. I think us as players, we want a turn 4 or 5 meta, but I think Bandai wants a turn 3 or 4 meta, and I just don't think it's going to coincide because we don't have any control on any design or anything like that. But I maybe they do something off the cuff and they make it a little more long lasting, because I wouldn't mind charging a 5th or 6th energy and playing a bigger cost card. I wouldn't mind doing that.
Yeah. So like a thing that comes up, I think that Bandai struggles to balance aggro and like aggro strategies. So they make stuff that like could kind of answer aggro, but a lot of the time it's just not good enough, or it's stuff that works too well going into aggro also. So it's like the aggro decks just get better because they just use that card also to like improve the mirror match, and then say like, all right, so if you're not playing aggro, you better hope that you draw the card. Right.
I mean, that's like, that's what at the end of the day, I guess that's all part of the territory of playing a card game or anything in general. There's always going to be checks and balances. There's always going to be the one deck that, beats this deck but can lose to this deck. It's the same thing in sports. I'm a huge Yankee fan. I grew up a Yankee fan. For the most part, I've enjoyed a life of success being a Yankee fan. And on paper, being in the American League East, they should dominate every team that's not the Red Sox. But for some reason, the Tampa Bay Rays always give the Yankees a tough time. And that's what I compare Dragon Ball to. You on paper, this is the best deck, but somebody can come out of nowhere with a rogue strategy that specifically counters what you're trying to do and give you a hard time. And that's what makes the competition, worthwhile, because, as powerful as Super Shenron is, if you give Super Shenron to a quote-unquote bad or less experienced player, and then you give it to an experienced player, the experienced player 100% of the time is going to have a better record than the inexperienced player. That's just the way the cookie crumbles. I mean, yes, it's a very powerful deck, but it 100% is not autopilot, and if you sequence improperly, or like you said, if you don't mulligan properly, or you don't know what cards to keep or what cards to ditch depending on your matchups, it could be a rough time for you. So we've been talking for almost an hour here. We're approaching the penultimate, couple questions here. So real quick, I wanted to shout out Joey from Crossworld TCG, the Eggman, and Android. We actually had a little discussion earlier in the week about some questions that I might be able to ask you, and they provided me with some information and some good questions to ask. So I want to shout out those guys for literally giving me the topics of conversation for tonight's podcast. And I also wanted to thank you for being on with us. I really do appreciate, a player of your magnitude coming on and just kind of picking your brain a little bit and understanding more along the lines of, what drives you as a competitor and your thoughts on the game. I think the Dragon Ball Super community needs more people like Tony Creatura. Am I pronouncing your name right, by the way?
Yeah, you are actually.
Okay, yeah, because
most people don't. But
yeah, I just kind of pronounce it the way it's spelled. So we definitely need more people like you. You kind of tell it like it is. It's the best deck. Play the best deck. I mean, if you have access to it, play it, right? So before we get on out of here, are there any shout-outs you want to give to anybody that might be listening?
I have to shout out More Minute Gaming, and people should, look out for them at future events as vendors. I want to shout out Chris McCormick for lending me a Victory Strike, Joe Campbell for helping me test, and then everybody from Team Toy Wiz, like Rob Russo, Phil Pena, Chris Tang Swan, everybody from there.
Sounds good. And if anybody who's listening to this podcast wants to get in touch with you or follow you on social media, are there any pages or links that we might be able to get for them so they can reach out to you and ask you a couple questions?
If people have questions, they could message me on Facebook. Like, I'm in the Dragon Ball community group, the Hyperbolic Time Chamber 1, the ARG. That, and then Twitter is just my first and last name, Tony Creatura. And that's primarily where people can get in contact with me for stuff like that.
Sounds good, brother. Well, I really appreciate you being on here again. Thank you so much. You're more than welcome to come on anytime. In the future, if you need anything, you need a platform to vent about something, or you're not happy with the way the game is going, we can definitely have a conversation in the future about it. I will definitely see you in AC. I know, I believe you're from the Jersey area, correct?
Yeah, Connecticut.
Okay, so you're in the tri-state area, so you're definitely going to AC then?
Yep.
Yeah, so we'll definitely see you there. And I wish you the continuing success, not only in Dragon Ball, but in your powerlifting. It's really cool that you do that too outside the game. But that's about it, man. We're going to get on out of here. For those of you listening, thank you so much for the support. Don't forget to hit this man up with questions. If you want to pick the brain of Mr. Creatura himself, contact him on Facebook, and just kind of, he's a really easy guy to talk to. I mean, we've been talking for about an hour already, and I never felt like I was starstruck or anything like that. So thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you again next week. Be there or be squared.